All right. In our adult professional lives, we all have to have difficult conversations, and some of which we're just ready, adapt to have, right? It's in a part of our daily life. It's a part of being a grown up. And yet there are some conversations that we all avoid. And so, what we want to do is talk today, just fly right into the eye of the storm about what are some of those conversations that you avoid. And especially when it comes to talking to your family members about a transition, about their desires, about your desires, whether it's a transition of a business, transition of wealth. And so, this kind of comes in a big wrapper of an estate plan. But before you get into the details of an estate plan, which we can talk through all those details, there's really this larger conversation, which is what's the elephant in the room? What are the conversations that you're avoiding and yet are so beneficial? And so we're going to talk through some examples. We're going to talk through why. Joined by Jeremiah and Randy, we all get to enjoy certified financial planner certification and the work that we do with our clients regarding developing a financial plan for their benefit and for future generations as well. So let's dive in.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of what we do as far as planning and supporting clients, it relates to the next generation. We always tell people that, the money that one generation has built and the wealth they've built is, the first job is to care for that family, right? Care for that generation. But often we know there's going to be leftover. We know there's going to be, assets passing the next generation. The question often is, are they ready? Are they going to appreciate these funds? Are they going to understand how hard it was to build these? Are they going to understand how hard it is to maintain these? And those conversations, just as you said, Laura, it's few and far between that we find a family that's already had these conversations. They're in a healthy spot, and both generations have clarity. They have shared expectations. Often we see they either had any conversations or they had, I don't want to say harmful conversations, but feelings got hurt. I guess, feelings got hurt, expectations were missed, and now there's this sore subject about wealth in the family.
Yeah. And I think the point that you're making is if you're waiting for the perfect moment, you're waiting for that time when everybody's on the same page, there's great synergy, everyone's ready to have this meaningful, deep conversation. Guess what? Right? That moment may never happen, or it may pass by and you're unaware of it, or it's just not going to happen. So we're not just talking about health, physical health, emotional health, right? Like there's not quite a perfect moment other than today.
I mean, again, expectations of the first generation going to the second generation, there could be completely different expectations, and that has to be really fleshed out. It has to be drawn, and the second generation may be appreciative of what the first generation did, but fully understanding the sacrifices and the work that was done, the risks that were taken on, the successes that were narrow escapes from disaster. I don't think that the follow-up generations, the second and third generations, can fully appreciate because they weren't there at that moment. At the same point in time, it doesn't mean that the follow-up generations can't appreciate and fully understand how to maintain that legacy. I really believe it can be translated, but there has to be conversation. There has to be open communication about it all.
Yeah. And some of it even getting somewhat practical, some families, there's this idea, grandfather bought this stock and this stock has grown and it's paid dividends. The family plan is never sell that stock, just pass it on, right? Don't touch it, don't break it, just enjoy the benefits of it. There's a whole nother type of family plan that says, hey, we've built all these assets and they were in, we'll just say, residential real estate. But we know in our area, that's not the future. That's not where we're headed to. So next generation, you got to figure out what's next. Grandpa built it, mom's generation sustained it, but now third generation, you got to do something new. You got to figure out what, and it's very different we see with families that and just as you said, Randy, those unspoken expectations that each generation, probably even each person has. You might have a parent generation that feels like I built this. I don't want anyone to break what I built. Just keep it going. Just, hold the stock that I bought. Whereas you may have the next generation thinking, oh, I'm going to get half and I'm going to do this with it. I'm going to do, having those unstated expectations, desires, having those be brought out in a healthy way can really shed light on family members of what's next for them.
Right. And I think the practical tip there is, because here we are on the cusp of some of the holidays. We're not saying to have this conversation sitting around the holiday dinner table, right? It's not a casual conversation, but I would recommend this to our listeners, which is start with questions. Start with listening. no matter what side of the table that you're on, you can gain something from listening to the other person's experience and their perspective.
I mean, I think that the three of us have, how do I say it? We've done this. We've done this. I mean, it's not something that we just counsel clients from afar. I mean, we've actually done this ourselves. I mean, we started sitting down and talking about this years before it actually happened. And we've had a successful transition from what I started nearly 50 years ago to your involvement early on and where we are right now. And again, I think I don't want to say we're envied, but I think we've done it right in what we've done. So I think there's a lot of things that we've gone through that we can talk to clients about. And this is how you make this transition. This is how you get from here to there. Anyway, I just think we have some experience that we can pass on to our clients.
Yeah. Yeah, and that we're not perfect, but we are figuring it out every day. And we're still in the midst of this process, this transition of ownership, as we're talking about a business transition of ownership, where
Hmm.
it started very early on with some preliminary conversations. It was all laid from a foundation of having good communication as family members, real talk, right? We had to weigh the pros and the cons and evaluate all those details kind of going into it. And now we're at that phase where we're actually seeing it come into play. So we're the second generation. Jeremiah and me get to step in. We're starting to build relationships with the current client base. We're understanding and appreciating in a whole new way the foundation that you built, Dad, over years and the economic cycles that you lived through, the ups and the downs, not to mention the business cycles that you went through, raising capital, growth, expansion, diversification in different ways of your service offering, the way you've retained clients over the years, right? There's so much to be learned there. And I think at the same time, too, we're now receiving this benefit of your encouragement, your daily support, your advice, your insight into kind of what we're now seeing into the next 50 years of the company. And there's a joy to be had there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful, we've seen clients do this and we get to experience this as a family of the healthy joy of moving forward. We've seen on the negative side, we've seen first generation folks who have transitioned the business and then their role becomes critiquer in chief, right? They are saying, oh, I never did that way. I wouldn't have done that. Ooh, watch out for this. Like they're not a cheerleader and they're not really excited about it. They almost want to like reach back in and take it back. And they're struggling with their role. And I think Randy, you have done such an amazing job in the midst of all this transition of passing on wisdom, passing on experience, but also becoming a cheerleader in chief, right? To say, hey, I'm so excited about what you guys are doing. I'm here to encourage. I'll, contribute all my thoughts and ideas. And, part of that, I guess it's both ways of we're excited about that. We're excited to hear your thoughts and hear your ideas. And I think there's other families that they become these closed off loggerheads trying to run the business as opposed to cheering each other on and celebrating each other's successes. So I don't think there's any magic sauce, but I do think to your comment, Randy, I mean, it started years before we made any sort of actual transitions of talking about desires and what do you want, where do you want to be 10 years from now? Where do I want to be 10 years from now? What are we worried about? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? And having all that as a foundation to then, like you said, Laura, curious about what this could be. And then eventually getting to, hey, what if we did that? Oh, I'd love that. Okay. And then we start piecing together not just a deal, but a future that I think
Mhm.
has really served our larger family
Mhm.
really well.
Yeah, because I think planning, right, for the future, and in this case, we're talking about the transfer of business ownership, but it could be other assets as well. It could be that you own commercial real estate or residential real estate properties, and you want to transfer that to the second generation. And the question becomes, do they want to be property owners and property managers, or do they have other use for those funds? And how flexible are you as the sort of asset holder, current asset holder, and allowing some flexibility of the use of those assets going forward? If the next generation has other plans, right? We're
Mm,
talking about our case scenario where our plans really aligned. We wanted to fall into the same business model and look to expand and move it into its future. Now, there's others who maybe that was their industry, was, let's use that example, commercial real estate, and their next generation really has no interest. So then there's another point of clarification between the two generations. Are you willing then for us to sell those properties so we can use it to invest in another business or another opportunity? So
Yeah, I
I
think I
think
think
that
that
insight there is that the planning conversation is about drawing clarity between the two generations, not just about capital and tax.
Yeah, and I mean, success doesn't necessarily get simpler with age. I look back over my life. I mean, I'm still actively engaged in the business, but how much has changed? And if you were set on saying we did it this way, we did this, that's the way we do it, and that's where we're going to do this going forward. If somebody has that mindset in this day and age, the technology and the change of business models and all the aspects of flexibility that you have to have in order to be successful and to maintain the your whatever it is, right, that you're doing, whether it be real estate, whether it be a business, whether it be a manufacturer, I mean, whatever the business model is. If you're stuck on this is what we did, this is how we did it, you're basically putting the seeds of destruction in there because
Mhm.
there's certain principles you never want to get away from, but by and large, you want to make sure that you are flexible enough to see the advantages of change and how you introduce those back into the company, or getting forward. So you want to be successful at the outcome, and you want to have something that is fruitful and it's dynamic and it's all the aspects of excitement of coming back to work. It's not just doing the same thing every single day and you print, you manufacture, you push out the back door. Is there something more dynamic here that you're
Mm.
trying to accomplish? So
Mm.
Oh, that's
anyway.
good. And I think there's a real practical aspect of how do you do this? I saw something recently where it was a question in this space. It was like, what's the one piece of financial advice you want to pass on to the next generation? Man, that's a hard question, right?
It is.
One thing, my whole life, one thing, the best thing. And so what we've found, what we do with our clients often is we have a framework, we have some resources that we use, but try and walk through some of the stories and get those stories like, where did this wealth come from? Oh, well, it was actually my grandfather gave me the seed money way back when, or your grandfather gave you the seed money and I worked with it and then it turned into this and understanding what it took to build, like what were the hard times? What were the things you look back and be like, oh, I missed it there? What are the things you look back and say, wow, I was so lucky to be in the right place at the right time? Like getting some of that story to come out is part of what shares, one
Mhm.
generation's lessons and allowing the other generation to experience those emotions of what it took to get here. And so there's a lot more of that. We have a number of, the framework we use, we have a number of series of questions, almost like back and forth between the two generations. But I think it's so hard to say, what's the one thing? Like, Randy, what's the one thing you've learned that everyone should know? That's tough because you've learned so much. But to really explain some of the journey, and not just your personal journey, but also the journey of wealth, the journey of the business, and we've got to enjoy a lot of those
Mhm.
stories and ask questions. And I think there's a lot of families that don't walk through that, and maybe the other generation isn't curious about it. I don't know, but I think it's so vital to really understanding where you've been.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I mean, the thing is that I always I'm curious. So I'm always wondering, I'm always interested in how people make money, how they make a living. And I'm never like, you do that and you make a living doing that. I mean, it's something I would never think about, but yet there are, so many multiple different ways to make money. And that's the beauty of living in a capitalistic society. I mean, you're not suppressed, so to speak, and you're not minimized because you have come up with a new idea. You have the right to fail, but you also have the right to succeed. And I mean, again, I'm always curious about how things are done. How do you get to that point? And I'm curious, like, how do you put the pieces together? And so one of my sayings I always say, people ask me a question, and I always say, I want to think about it because it gives me time to go through and kind of flesh out, pull back the onions, peel it. Like, what's at the core here? I mean, what is it that you're trying to accomplish at the core, right?
I like that illustration of the onion because we're talking about having the difficult conversation or having the conversation that you want to avoid. And you maybe get in the midst of it and they're like, well, it's a little bit easier than I thought it would be. And you're going to find points of alignment and you're going to find points potentially of disalignment or a need for clarity. And so to have a structure in place where there's consistent, regular meetings. We have a quarterly meeting where we get together as family members, as past business owners, as current business owners to talk about kind of on the business, right? Some people call this family governance if we're talking about the transfer of a business. And it could be otherwise, just among family members to have a consistent family meeting where the expectation is we're going to talk about some of these maybe topics that we would otherwise avoid, or maybe it's not
Right.
polite to bring it up at the holiday dinner table, right? But we're going to create a structure because it is like an onion where you're peeling back multiple layers, and you're going to find points that are sweeter than others, and you're going to find some points that are a little bit more sour or pungent or potent, or you're going to strike some chords, trigger, that's such a popular word right now, right? And I think too there's a respect to create some emotional readiness. You don't want to just throw this conversation in front of somebody without them being prepared and having processed it. And so I think that's a respectful approach to some of these conversations is, hey, can we get a time on our calendar to have this conversation so they can anticipate it and they can be emotionally ready for it too. So consistency, it's multi-layered, and make sure that there's some emotional readiness.
Yeah. Such a good comment. I mean, Laura and I have 4 small kids, and it's really hard to finish a conversation while we're at an event and our kids are running around just because they'll need something. They pop in, they pop out. And we've gotten better at that over the years. But to have like a deeper, serious financial conversation in our family while there's, kids running around, this one's jumping in the pool, this one's asking, can I get dinner? Like that would be hard. It'd be really tough. And so to, spring that on somebody at Thanksgiving, hey, I really want to have a deep moment with you,
Mhm.
especially I think of an older generation wanting to talk to a younger generation about something that's meaningful and important, but that younger generation, because it's say a family party, fully distracted, right? And having a hard time lining into the importance there. And so I like your comment, Laura, of really setting aside time to have a purposeful conversation. And I imagine the first one is going to be awkward, right? I don't know if there's much around that other than acknowledging it. Hey, this is hard to talk about. This is not something we've done before, but I'd love to have a more connected relationship with you about finances, and let's start talking through that. And
Mhm.
yeah, imagine the second one will be better than the first one. I bet the third one will be the best so far, right? As
Mhm.
people keep getting into this type of structure. And we're talking in the context of a business or real estate holding, some sort of a wealth dynamic passing forward. We have a number of clients who they're not talking about that yet. They're just talking about, do mom and dad even have enough money to be okay, or do we need to plan for their care? Like, I
And
I
they
don't
may
even
not
know
know.
I don't even know where they're at. And we're not asking, to be overly involved in their finances, but we want to make sure they're supported. We want to know if we need to support them, if, all of that. And it can be a hard conversation. I gotta say, it starts off as a hard, uncertain conversation, but as people start to have them, man, it can be really powerful to build, I mean, some real intimacy amongst family members of where they're headed.
Life circumstances change your perspective. I mean, as you were talking about, I was thinking about your parents who have cared for your grandparents for a number of years. They're just leaving that season, and I've said to them on a few occasions, like, take notes, right? Like, because tell us what you would want, right, in that moment of life. And we've had some mild conversations about it, some short conversations, but there's a need to prompt a follow up where we sit down and say, what was your takeaway? And I venture to guess that their perspective now, having walked through that season, caring for their parents, is different than what it was before because they got a
Mm.
front row seat. They walked through it themselves, just as we're going to have a different perspective. However, start having the conversations now. Plan it in the calendar because it's not just going to happen, right, organically. So, as we've worked with a variety of different clients over the years, we've been invited into these family conversations. And I'll tell you, the ones that start earlier on and happen more frequently than just once are the ones where all family members benefit. The harder conversations are the ones where certain family members are excluded because they want to continue avoiding that conversation. Maybe it's just a one off conversation where there's no clear outcomes, or simply the conversation never happens. And then the next generation is calling our office trying to get all the information from us, or they're trying to piece it together themselves. So
Again,
I don't know if you guys have some examples of that, but
again, I think you're opening up the book. You're just saying having a successful business doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have successful transition.
Mm.
And it's important to be able to determine whether or not the people that you're looking at, hopefully it's family members, it could be somebody different outside the family, but what questions, I think, Jeremiah, you did a really good thing for me right at the very onset. You gave me, I don't know, I think 10 or 20 questions that you wanted answers from and about, and made me stop and think. These are questions that I hadn't really thought about, but it helped me dig down deep into the process and come up with some answers that gave you a better understanding of what I was thinking. Why was I doing this versus that? What were my expectations? And I think that it really helped. And that's what we do for businesses. That's what we do And that series of questions, it helps to, like I said, peeling back the onion, it gets to the core of it. So we understand what's important. What's the most important thing on this particular subject matter? And that's really a big part of what we do, is to get to that core.
Yeah, and maybe what part of the first steps in talking about transfer of responsibility, transfer of stewardship, even transfer of some leadership, is there's got to be kind of a meeting of an exchange of information in a respectful way. Keep coming back to clear as kind. It serves all people around the table. And so, really as we wrap up our time together, I think what we're communicating here is a call to action. As you sit down for the holidays, as you interact with your family members, some of us look forward to that more than others. Some of us have better communication with our family members than others. We're not saying that it's not sometimes the difficult conversation, but don't avoid it. Make space for it. Maybe make an invitation to it. Start by being an active listener, and have the intent to be clarity when you're talking about transition of ownership or transition of wealth. So any last minute thoughts from you guys?
We could open this up for a lot more conversation.
Yep.
But I think we've hit on the key points for this time allotted that we have.
Yeah, I think I'd say it's not easy, but it's good. And it's going to take some time to be patient with each other, give a lot of grace to each other as everyone kind of walks through this. But it's good. It's a good conversation to have. You can add real value to a family.
So we really appreciate you listening to us and spending this time. Hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving. Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.